Greeting, Poe fans, and welcome back to Review Morgue.
Dun,
Hey,
dun, dun. Sorry.
I was waiting for that.
Always calls for it. I can't help it.
I know it's good though.
Hmm.
So we are moving along the list of Poe adaptations, I guess you'd say. I can't speak today.
Hmm.
And the next
We're
one
not
on
going
the
there.
list is 1935, and it is The
Hmm.
Crime of Dr. Crespi. Not
Yes,
crispy, but
yes.
Crespi.
Crespi, yes. Yeah, it'd
Yes.
be kind of cool if it was Mr. Crispy. Mr. Crispy.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's not.
But then it would have to involve baking, and that would be weird.
And donuts. Okay.
All right, let's get food out of this recipe.
You started with the crispy thing. Okay. Sorry.
I know, sorry. So
It's okay.
this film was directed and produced by the same man, John
Hmm.
H. Auer. It sounds like Bauer without the B. And
Hmm.
he worked for Republic Pictures, and he basically had to kind of go over to Mexico and do some films there. And then the US decided, hey, this guy's pretty cool. He's done some really good work. Let's invite him back.
Hmm.
And so Republic hired him. And so he began doing movies for Republic. He basically did crime dramas, he did musicals, which Jeannie and I were talking about. It's like opposite ends of the spectrum when you think about what they involve, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, unless you're talking about Phantom of the Opera that gets both musical and crime.
Yeah, that's very true.
So,
And so but he was one of the only directors that worked for Republic that produced all of his films, which is really pretty pretty high up if you think about it for back then.
yeah, especially if he had the backing and the money to do it. That
Right.
was the biggest influence in those days, since
Yeah.
it was still, it was still very early on. They were
Yeah.
still developing and all that. So bringing your own wealth into it had a lot
Exactly.
of control in what
Yeah.
he got to do. So that's why he got to stay director and producer.
Right. And and he may have had some great investors, that actually
True.
helped him as well. But
Hmm.
the thing that he didn't like making for films for Republic were Westerns, which that was Republic's, the article I read, bread and butter.
Hmm.
And so if you remember
Yeah.
and they produced some fantastic Westerns.
Oh yeah, Lone Ranger. I mean, Gene Autry and Trigger, and
Mhm.
that was their staple beginning of
Exactly.
Republic was the cowboy film.
Yeah. So just very interesting to think about. And so
Yep.
this film is only right around an hour. If you look at
Hmm.
IMDb, I think it says it's like 63 minutes, but it is free on YouTube right now. So,
Yep.
if you want to go out and watch it, definitely do that. And you might wait and see what we say before you decide.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing we're going to talk about is I just noticed behind on your head on the spine of that book,
Yes.
it really, really is bothersome when they misspell Alan.
Yes. And it's
And
so,
especially when they use it in the advertisement and everything. And it's like,
yes.
if you're not going to spell Alan right, just make it an A. Because in all actuality, he there at the end was just using EA Puck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then Carmen and I, we were talking about, these are all adaptations
Mhm.
somewhat. Some they're so far off the mark, we can't even call them adaptations. We're just like, yeah, you touched upon the name. But when we're reading it on the film, you can't really see it close enough because it's such an old
No.
film. It's black and white. I think it says influenced by,
I
but
do
it could
too.
be adapted by. But I'm pretty sure it's more influenced because based on the story
Yeah.
in the premature burial with Edgar Allan Poe, it was somewhat, we all know what it's about. Dude gets buried alive,
Hmm.
premature.
Right.
That's the whole premise of the title.
Well, and there
But this one
are,
is more,
I was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
there are two differences. One, in Poe's premature burial, the man has catalepsy, which causes him
Hmm.
to be in this kind of coma-like state where it seems like he's possibly dead. And this was inducing catalepsy, I guess you could say.
Yes, and that's another thing we were going to talk about too, is in the story. Actually, let's start from the very beginning. The very beginning of the movie, it's kind of like you have no idea where it's going.
No, especially the way it begins, because it begins
Yeah,
comically.
yeah, and the person they introduce at the beginning that has more of a speaking part,
Mhm.
you're like, okay, who is he the character and what does he play in this? But then you find out he only shows up at the beginning and at the end, and he really doesn't have anything other than just comic relief.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you're like, why do you even need a comic relief? You haven't even told the story yet,
But
you
then,
know?
Jeannie, I thought about that because, especially since he came back at the end, which was definitely not necessary,
Right.
Poe throws in humor at some of the oddest places, which mostly comes out as satire, very dark humor. And so, were they paying homage to Poe by doing that?
No,
Okay.
I don't think they were. I
I was
think
trying to
because
give him a
I
little.
I recognize this actor uh briefly because I had seen him, if I can't remember exactly where I've seen him in, but
Well,
I'm pretty sure I saw him in some earlier works. So
the Italian actor.
yeah, the
Okay.
Italian guy. And in all honesty, if I thought they were being uh respectful to show,
Yes.
the kind of that I it wasn't to me. To me, it was just one of those things to where why?
It
Why?
it almost, to me, it almost felt like I was trying to give them a little bit of, grace. But
Yeah, yeah. I,
I
I did like it. I did think it was interesting that they called the clinic the Taft Clinic
yeah,
after, President Taft.
right, right.
And interesting, and when they say that the Dr. Crespi,
Hmm.
would only take patients of people that he knew.
Or were
So,
referred or recommended by another
yeah,
doctor that he held
that
in
he
prestige.
he
Yeah,
basically approved.
yeah.
So right then and there, it tells you that this Dr. Crespi is a control freak,
Yes,
and
yes,
that he's going to be one of those
yes.
controlling the everything. And then especially one of the things that really bothered me about the movie, it was kind of like in the silent film. There was more gaps of not talking that were like, there needs to be something here.
Yeah.
You shouldn't even included that. You can cut that out and you wouldn't even affected the story at all.
Hmm.
And the biggest issue that I had was the camera angles. Some of the camera angles were so bad that it's like I couldn't even see what they were filming. It
Yeah,
was so dark. There was no
the
light. There
lighting.
was
Yeah.
no good camera action, so
Hmm.
to speak.
Yeah, no, I
And
know what
okay,
you
I
mean.
gotta ask you, what was that little pygmy skeleton in his office? That was creepy.
I wondered the same thing because it seemed like it was a Halloween decoration that was not appropriate for the chief of surgery's office.
However, the more I thought about it, when we got to the whole, we won't give away what crime he did or anything. You can
Right,
kind of,
right.
the story itself is interesting.
It
I mean,
is. Yes.
it is typical of what stories we see in today's movies.
Hmm.
But the more I thought about that pygmy skeleton, the more it started making sense. I'm just going to call it that because that's what it
Okay.
looked like.
Okay. I'll go
When
with that.
he started playing around in his mad scientist thing and concocting these things,
Hmm.
and when he injected the person
Right.
with this concoction
Hmm.
that gave them a pretty much complete shutdown of the body.
Yeah.
You know, they were
Paralysis.
still,
Yeah.
complete paralysis. They were still alive enough that, but they were couldn't move, couldn't talk. I mean, you know, Karari. Karari was founded around this time when a lot of them start introducing themselves to some of the tribes
Hmm.
that would use that because they would create the Karari off of the poison darts
Okay.
from the tree frogs in the Amazon.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's kind of a little bit of what they were doing.
Hmm.
But curare, and then doctors started using curare as a type of anesthesia.
Okay. Okay.
And so
Sense.
that's when I started thinking that, I wonder if that was like he went on some kind of trip, and
Yeah.
killed this pygmy monkey or whatever on the trip. And that's why he brought that skeleton. Because, I mean, I swear, every time they show that skeleton, I'm going, that's
Yeah.
just creepy, if
I I
anything.
I thought the same thing, and those type of films where they would go on safari,
Hmm.
Tarzan was very popular during that time frame. I could
Yep.
see that tie-in, and if that was the case, it would have been really nice to have it explained.
Yes.
But
And
he
that
kind
was
of
the
working
other thing.
alone, so he didn't really have anybody to talk to. So,
Yeah. Or he wouldn't talk anyway, because that was one of the things is he would be very calm and collected on the outside, but
right.
if you pissed him off, then he started yelling at you and
Yeah.
all this and that was when you get his accent. And that's one of the things we were talking about. He
Hmm.
had a very strong accent, especially when he wasn't controlling his speech.
Right. Right.
So if you're going to watch it, you
Put
might
the
want to put
captions
closed
on.
captioning on.
Because I didn't at first, but then I added it when I was struggling a little bit to understand the accent, and that helped a lot. And so the actor that played Dr. Crespi was Eric von Stroheim, and you can see his name right above
Mhm.
his head. And one of the other films that he did was Sunset Boulevard. So, a little bit of notoriety later, and then a big film, Oscar winner. And
Yes.
then the next actor you will definitely recognize even before you know what his name really is. He is probably at this point in 1935 the most known, probably running on the fame of all these Universal Monsters movies that he's been in, and that his name, the actor, is Dwight Fry. And his most famous role was Renfield in the 1931 movie Dracula. But he was also Fritz in Frankenstein. And
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to write this down. He was either in Son of Dracula, Son of Frankenstein, or Bride of Frankenstein. I don't remember which one, but he was in another one. And he did lots of films, and in this film he gets to be sane, so which is nice for him. So
Yeah, it was probably a change in his acting career.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But he did a fantastic job. And then Paul Guilfoyle was the victim, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ross, yes, Dr.
Stephen
Ross,
Ross. Yeah,
yes,
Stephen
because
Ross.
there's the Dr. Arnold as well. I didn't write down his name because he was
Dr. Arnold, I believe, wasn't he the one that was Fry? Wasn't
no,
that Fry's character?
no, that was Dr. Tom.
Dr. Thomas,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Couldn't
it's a
remember
lot of
which one was
doctors to
which.
keep up with.
Yeah. Dr. Thomas was the famous horror dude. Yeah, then
Yes. What do you
What did
think?
we say? Not Dr. Ross. What was the one? Not
Dr.
Dr.
Ross
Thomas. What was it?
was Paul Guilfoyle,
Yes.
and he
He's
actually
the
went on
one
to
that
do
had.
Grapes of Wrath. That was kind of his
Yeah.
notoriety. And he was the victim. And then Dr. Arnold was the other doctor
That's it.
that kept flirting with the nurse.
Yes. I kept wanting to call him McDonald.
Yes, and I believe the nurse was played by Harriet Russell, and it was the
Mhm.
only film she ever did. That she has one
Yeah.
credit on IMDb, so I thought that was really interesting. She did a really good job. She was fun.
Yeah, she was. She was very interesting. It was I think she was the most emotive, honestly,
Yes,
out of all of them,
I agree.
as far as acting goes. Yeah, Stromheim, he bothered me so bad because of his it's like he had an addiction to cigarettes.
Oh, I
It's like
know. Yeah,
cigarettes,
he
and then he
was a
was
chain
when he was
smoker,
flicking the
definitely.
ashes off, but there was no ashtray or anything in sight. I'm going, where the heck are you throwing those ashes, dude? You gonna burn down the set?
Oh, I'm going to double check myself on Harriet Russell. Actually, Harriet Russell was Dr. Ross's wife, Estelle.
Oh
That's
yes.
I totally got those mixed up. And so
Oh no, then she was not the one I was talking about
yeah, and
because
and
she
really
wasn't emotive. She was melodramatic to the max.
yes, she was. And she had a bigger part than the nurse did. And
Yeah.
but yeah, but Harriet Russell, Estelle, the wife, that was her only film credit at all.
And I hate to say it, I can understand why.
Yeah.
If you watch the movie, you will understand why.
If she was a witness for court, she would be a hostile witness.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So, all right. So kind of knowing who the characters were. So you have Dr. Crespi, who he did a crime based on the title.
Right?
Then you have Dr. Thomas. Neither one of them got along. Dr. Crespi was the chief of surgery. Dr. Thomas kind of worked under him, as well as Dr. Arnold. And then Dr. Stephen Ross is the victim. And it seemed to me that he didn't work at the same clinic as those three because of the issue between Crespi and Ross. It didn't
Well,
seem like, you know what
are
I'm,
we talking? Are you talking about Dr. Ross?
yes, that he didn't
Yeah, Dr.
work,
Ross did not, or
work
they
there.
were not at the same clinic. Uh they weren't even in the same zone
No, well,
so much because
yeah, they hadn't worked together for 5 years, and you can, I don't know how many spoilers we want to give, but it's an age-old issue. Stephen Ross was married to
Mhm,
Estelle. They were married for about 5 years. Their child was
mhm.
about five. And Dr. Crespi and Ross used to be very good friends. And then all of a sudden, after the marriage, dun dun dun, they're not friends anymore. So you can read between the lines.
Yeah, but I think it was more than just a step as the problem
It was based on,
because the newspaper articles and everything he pulled out that manila folder
mhm.
out of his drawer, and he was opening it up, and his first thing on there wasn't his marriage, but it was his accolades.
Yes.
So,
And as he looked at these newspaper clippings of the Ross's honors and recognized in the newspaper, then the marriage notification for Ross or Stephen Ross and Estelle, he was
mhm,
taking a letter opener, and I'm going to use my pencil, and
yeah,
he was tapping
yeah,
hard on the desk, and it made
yes.
this noise, and to me, what it reminded me of was the beating heart and the telltale heart. And I kind of thought that could be an homage to another story from Poe.
Well, the irony of that is it reminded more of the pendulum
Okay, I
swinging.
get that too.
The
The,
tapping was more of like the
yes,
swing, and
yeah,
then the harder, the lower it got, the harder he got until finally he broke it.
yes, yeah.
And it was at that moment when it's like at the moment that it broke, that's when he made the decision to follow through with his plan.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because that's when you could tell he knew what he was going to do next.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
it just so happened that Ross and Stephen and his wife Estelle were in a car accident, and
Hmm.
Crespi is like from what we could tell, he was like the major figure in surgery. He was the best doctor around for any kind of surgery, and that's why he
Yeah, he
was the
was the
chief.
chief surgeon at the clinic.
And so everyone was desperate to get him to operate
Hmm.
on Stephen Ross.
Yeah,
And
because
that's where it went downhill.
yeah, and the thing about it is that if he wanted to get his revenge on him, he could have done it during the surgery and gotten away
Right.
with it
Yes, yes,
without anyone knowing anything else. But that's not how he did his job and he did his job well.
right.
And he saved Ross's life only to put his vile plan into action. Dun, 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 of
Exactly.
revenge.
And I think in a way he did it that way so he could look like the hero to all of
Mhm.
these other physicians as well as Estelle, and be
Yes,
regarded as just, doing the right thing, even though that he and Stephen were not friends anymore. And
right.
then it was like, okay, now I'm going to do this and no one's going to know that it's me who's done it.
Yeah, and the one thing that got me is that at the part where he's literally telling Ross what he's doing,
Uh-huh.
all I could think of was this is the cask of Amontillado. You
Yes.
know,
It was
this is
very
all
much
about the
so.
setup of revenge,
Yes.
for a slight against him that honestly you don't even know if it was a slight or not. It was just one of those things that the dude's probably not with it.
Oh yeah.
And but I will say that the movie itself, it became interesting.
Yes. Started
It
slow and
Yes, it
worked
took a
its way.
while, even with that little comic relief at the very beginning, which had me just sitting there going, "What
Why?
does this have to do with anything?"
Yeah.
But uh, it did kind of give me more. What's the word I'm looking for? Draw me in. It kind of gave me more interest
Yes.
towards the.
It engaged you.
Yes, but unfortunately for most of the wrong reasons, because I was just like going, what is that in the background? Why are they, what is, they would, dude, no. Okay, are these people idiots? If you can turn off that part of your brain where you're not going, what? It
Yeah.
is kind of interesting. It is very dated for the time,
Yeah.
but it is a tale as old as time.
Yeah. I mean, it really
I
is.
hate to
And
say it is.
well,
Sorry.
and I will say, when he does go to the morgue where Stephen is, and Stephen is in a cataleptic state that is induced
Hmm.
by Crespi.
Hmm.
He Crespi is so malicious and so Montresor at this point. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and it was dark, it was creepy. He had to go, down into it. It was downstairs. And it so much reeked of the cask of Amontillado. And Fortunato, in a way, was kind of helpless, when you think about it, and so
Hmm.
was Stephen Ross.
Yeah. And the most interesting thing I will say about this is that one of the characters at the very beginning that I started off not liking
Hmm.
because I thought he was going to have more of a influence and be more of the bad person.
Okay.
Might be more of a sidekick to Crespi rather
Right.
than
Yeah.
turning out to be one of the heroes
Hmm.
in the story. So that in itself was a nice change of pace that
Yeah.
I enjoyed of that part.
Which character are you referring to?
Dr. Thomas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I kind of think I went into it because I looked at who the actors were before I watched it because I was making notes for myself and
Yeah.
to see, okay, what, it's always nice to know what else have they been in? Did they go on to do more after these early films, or was this the height of their career or whatever?
Hmm.
And when I saw that it was the actor that played Renfield, it was like, okay, is he that stereotyped and he is going to be the sidekick? And yes, it was a very nice twist. I don't want to give too much away, but yes.
Yeah, and see, I'm the exact opposite. If I'm going to watch a movie, I'm going to watch the movie ignorant going in.
Mhm.
I might recognize them, because I know Boris Karloff.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
those big names. You can't not know those.
Yeah.
But like Vincent Price and all those. But
Absolutely.
the story and the movie itself, I'm not going to research or look up anything about it until after I've watched it.
Yeah.
Because to me, it will make it even worse for me.
Well,
It's bad enough that I'm
it'll be
critical of
biased. Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I'm so critical of movies to begin with because of either the lighting, the story, or whatever.
Yeah.
But if I add in any kind of bias pre the movie, then you might as well just say, no, I'm out,
Yeah. That
especially if it's a book. Now, if I've read the book before I've watched the movie,
yeah.
you just might as well just give it up because I will rip it to shreds.
I saw a meme just yesterday about that. If I read the
Mhm.
book and then I go see the movie, yes, I am that person that is going to tell you everything that is not right.
That's
Um,
right.
but anyway, not to digress, but I'm a little bit different in that way. I get excited when I see a name or I, if I have researched and go, oh, it's that person. And so
Hmm.
I sometimes I do research before, sometimes I wait till afterward. Sometimes if it's an actor or actress I recognize but can't remember their name, I'll look it up while I'm watching it. But I've trained myself not to go into it if I have done all that research to think, oh, it's going to just stink and just, be horrible because it's somebody I don't like. And so,
You can't do that. I guess one of my problems with that is that as much as I love actors and actresses and I respect what they do for a
yeah.
living, it is a job, it is a career.
Hmm.
I'm not a fanatic about them.
Yeah.
I, I could care less on half the time, except for a very few.
Hmm.
Like if they put themselves and they remake something and they put somebody else in their place.
Right.
For example, like the Star Trek reboot, the 2009 reboot.
Right.
I was so adamantly against it, and I did not want to
I
go
was at
see it.
first. I was at first as well.
Uh, but because they made an alternate reality of it,
The Kelvin universe or timeline.
they were they were able to introduce the same characters
Hmm.
as the character names,
Right.
but not the same character.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the only thing that I was okay with.
Yeah.
But any other time, if you try to reboot and then you put the wrong character, it's just like if you did this movie
Yeah.
and yes, it's an older movie, but if you tried to redo the movie and you could possibly make it better. I mean, I'm not saying you can't.
This could be remade into a modern film, and I think it would do
Yes.
well if the right people were acting in it and you had the
Mhm.
right director to fix some of the things that need to be
Right.
fixed. Yeah.
Yes, it would do well. It would do well that way. That's one of the reasons why I like watching British TV is because they do stick with some actors for a long time, but they're okay with just killing them off, switching them out. They
Yeah.
don't care because it's all about the story.
Right.
And then the characters themselves, you might be invested in them, but at the same time, they bring in someone different that you start getting more attached to,
Yeah.
or you like just as well as the other ones.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the thing with this story. I'm gonna honestly say there wasn't one character I liked above any else
Okay.
because they all had their good, the bad.
Yeah.
Um, they weren't memorable. I hate to say it in any way, shape, or form to me,
I agree. It
except for
was,
Estelle and her overdrama.
yeah. And as we said, the Dr. Crespi's nurse was a little bit comedic, and she had a little bit of pizzazz and more,
Yeah.
as you said, emotive than the other ones did.
And then the one actor out of all of them that had nothing to do with the story, he was the most interesting out of all of them, but he was only in there at the very beginning and at the very end, and you're going,
Yeah.
okay,
Thanks for seeing it, or thanks for letting
yeah,
us see you for a minute.
yeah, thanks for bringing, it's like bring in the clowns. It's like, okay, there he
Yeah.
goes.
Oh, I know. Well, one thing I want to bring up too is that the scene where I was trying to remember, let's see, look at my notes. It was after, it was when Crespi is operating on Ross. And
Mm-hmm,
it was very interesting because you had all those different doctors, around him and the nurses, and they kept panning the camera like quick shot of this face, this face,
mm-hmm.
this face with all these different reactions. And I thought that was a nice way to build suspense. And it did, there was no dialogue during that time frame. They did it again when the funeral was going on. And it was like, it just those quick shots of different people. And I do think that that was well done. I think some of the other shots lacked the way they filmed them. I guess the
Mm-hmm.
cinematography of it, it did lack depth. But those two instances I thought were well done.
Yeah, for the most part, with the camera angles and everything, with the facial
Yeah,
to tell the story with using body language rather than dialogue.
right.
That
Exactly.
was well done in that aspect. The one
Yeah.
thing I did not like about the operating scene
Hmm.
is you have the two doctors that start at the sink and they're washing up before they go into the operating room. And then
Right.
all of a sudden you have Dr. Crespi who just waltzes into the operating room, goes to the sink, and then washes up and then goes back into the operating room. And you're like, you don't do that. Because
Right.
the whole reason
Exactly.
you go to wash your hands and everything is to get rid of the germs. You don't
Yeah.
walk through the operating room first and then go.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Hmm.
that was that was bad stage direction in my opinion.
Yeah, and one other, another place with dialogue, and again, it was a little bit of body language, was when Ross had died or thought was dead. And
Hmm.
I think, and it set up the scene early on when Thomas couldn't remember, when it was another person at the beginning of the movie that Thomas had to go get the death certificate from Crespi. And
Hmm.
Crespi, that was the first instance we see how, what's the right word? Erratic, he can be
Yes, that
being
works.
someone.
Yes.
Yeah. And because Thomas said, I think it was this time, and he was like, you have to be exact. And then
Yeah.
later on, when Ross dies, and Thomas tells Crespi he needs the death certificate before Crespi leaves for the day. And as we know, the death certificate had already been written. And then
Hmm.
Crespi, like, just to throw him off because he's picking it up, and he goes, check the time. And then Thomas goes, 6:15. And then
Yes.
Crespi was like, that's right, or something like that. Kind of like he wanted to yell at
Well,
him again. But Thomas picked up on this. There was some suspicion going.
oh, that was the one thing that aggravated me the most.
Hmm.
There was no such thing as suspicion or anything about this because he wrote the death certificate before he went and gave him the
Right.
shot,
Exactly.
put the
Exactly.
time down and everything, but then he hides the death certificate on his desk. So then when Dr. Thomas comes in and he looks at him, he goes, what was the time?
Yeah.
And Dr. Thomas goes, 6:15. And then he kind of gets this, Crespi gets this weird look on his face because he doesn't want to get the death certificate out while he's watching him
Right. He's holding
because
it in his hand.
no, he reaches under that thing and pulls it out,
Yeah.
already filled out. So
Hmm.
Thomas sees him, and I'm going, yeah, that's not subtle.
Yeah, don't make it obvious that you've done something. And we're not going to tell you what Thomas was suspicious of with Crespi because
Hmm.
that will give something away. But this little part is just very interesting to talk about. But it's like, okay, dude, if you're trying to disguise that you are trying to kill somebody, you don't fill out the death certificate beforehand.
And then pull it out from on top of your desk, already filled out, while the guy
Exactly.
is standing there asking you to fill out a death certificate. And
And
you hand him
so
one that's already filled in.
it's just like the purloined letter. We have the purloined death certificate. It's right in plain sight.
It was just that just bothered me
I
so bad.
know, I know. And we won't say what happens with Crespi
Yeah.
because some things happened and we'll keep that a secret. But I just thought that was very interesting the way that played out.
Yeah, that to me was just really bad all the way around.
Yeah,
I was like, okay.
yeah.
But, for the most part, it it did not align with the premature burial story per
Um,
se.
because,
It did have a
yeah.
lot of elements from other
Hmm.
Poe, you know, stories, but it did have the premature burial, just the premise of it.
Of
The
burying somebody
basic,
alive.
yeah,
Yes,
burying
yes,
someone alive.
yes.
So that in itself, and that's why I say it was influenced by rather than adapted.
I agree, but I really do think that maybe that some of them had probably read more of Poe than others, and we don't
Hmm.
know how much our had read of Poe, but there are several elements of other stories, and like we're finding with some of these early films where it says influenced by, adapted by,
Hmm.
suggested by, I think was one of them, that they do contain more than just what the major premise is. And that's really kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for that early time period in cinematography,
Hmm.
they are good for what they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't really compare them to what we have now, but for the early times, they did well.
Yeah, and the ending, I would really say in 1935, seeing that at the theater with what happened at the end with Ross, don't
Hmm.
I'm not going to give
Not
this
Ross,
spoiler, but yes,
Crespi.
no, talk about Ross. You know what happens.
But Crespi's the one that does it. If we're talking about the same thing,
We may
I'm
be
not
talking about
talking about
I'm talking about
Ross is the one that got premature buried.
right, right, but I'm just going to say something that happens with him at the end is very, very, it would have been like very scary in 1935 in the theater seeing it.
Okay, I'm if I don't know what you're talking about, I was thinking more of what Crespi does at the
Okay.
very end because even in today, it is it is not it is more of a faux pas in certain movies. They don't show the full effect.
Right. No, and I agree with what you're saying too. I know what you're talking about. Um,
Mhm.
I am secretly sending you a message so you can see what I'm talking about so we don't give it away.
Are you sending it through Zoom?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there it is. Okay, I don't know why that would be the scary part, but okay, yeah.
No, it's just the way it happened. And again, I don't want to give any spoilers away. I just
In
I
all actuality, it wouldn't happen. That was the thing that bothered me the most about it. That would not have happened.
well, and there was no explanation of why Thomas and Arnold let it happen. And
I know, that's what I'm saying. It
yeah,
was kind of like
it
it was one
shouldn't.
of those other, in my opinion, uh miswritings.
Yeah. Again, and that's one of the things that I'm probably going to talk about when we do our Ravens and
Hmm.
Raven calls and cat hisses, I, is the writing. The writing was lackluster, but we'll talk about that in
Yeah,
a moment when we do that. And it could be time. Are you ready to
I'm ready.
go
I think
for
we've hit
it?
everything we can
Okay.
without giving away the whole film, which we don't want to
Yes.
do.
Oh, we normally, I think, do a pretty good job of keeping some things hidden
Yes.
under the floorboard or buried alive.
Yes, exactly. Under the boardwalk. Okay, now you got that song stuck in my
Oh,
head.
you
Thanks.
always do that. It's under the floorboard.
It's still under the boardwalk. I can't
It
help.
beats to me.
No, no, no. It's under the boardwalk, out
Okay, all
of
right.
the
As we
sun.
digress and become
Okay.
silly on this
Yeah.
dewy
As we
Sunday
get caught in the
afternoon.
60s,
Yes.
world.
Oh yes. Okay, Jeannie. All
Um,
right. What's your calls and hisses?
I would have to give this only two Raven caws.
Okay.
Only because, get it? Cause. Okay, so there were two instances that truly gained my
Okay.
interests in the movie.
All right.
So that's why it's only two Raven caws.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give it five black cat hisses.
Wow.
There is just way, way, way too much inconsistency, way too much bad videography,
Mhm.
and the acting was just, in my opinion, atrocious.
Yeah.
I mean, even for that time period, there were only about two actors out of that whole thing that was even worth watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
unfortunately, that's just
did.
gonna have to be my take on it.
That's
So,
hey, that is totally okay. And
mm,
we're not going to like every single film
mm-mm.
for various reasons.
I
And
can guarantee I won't like. I'm too picky. What can I say?
that's okay. All right. So for me, I'm probably going to give it, I'm going to probably give it the same to Ravenclaws because this storyline influenced by Poe, just like I like that word you use rather than adapted.
Hmm.
It totally could have been an excellent film.
Hmm.
And I think that I don't know if our just did not have the budget to do more or hire some better actors, but the things I did like about it was, even though the comic relief really had nothing to do with it, it was kind of cutesy, and a lot of films back then in that time frame in the early 30s, mid 30s did that kind of thing. But I like the storyline. That's probably the best thing that I can say, and some of the buildup of the suspense that they used. Um,
Hmm.
but then with Black Cat Hisses, I'm probably going to say I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4. And reason being, again, the writing. I think you pointed out with the some of the time actors were just not speaking at all, and it was body language. And when you look at Dr. Crespi, that particular actor, Eric von Stroheim, he seemed to me to be too old to play the character of
Hmm.
being a possible love interest for Estelle 5 years earlier. And I really think he was miscast. He was not horrible, but if you had taken the actor who played Thomas, and I forget who was Renfield back in the day,
Hmm.
Dwight Fry, I think he could have been a much better Dr. Crespi, and his talent was lost in that film.
Very much so. I'll agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah,
His talent, Arnold's talent,
yeah,
and the nurse, Dr. Crespi's nurse,
yes,
those three were so underutilized with their talent
yes.
that I think it did more damage to the film than anything.
I agree. If they had been cast differently, they were the ones holding the film together. And
Hmm.
the funny Italian actor
Yeah,
at the beginning and the end of the film.
yeah. The one guy that might have had like 3 minutes of dialogue in the whole thing
Yes.
that had nothing to do with the story
No, not at
was
all.
one of the most interesting of the story.
Yeah. And
So
so,
yeah,
yeah, and to me too, this is another one, and we talked about this. I can't remember which film it was. There was not a whole lot of music within, when
mm,
you've got a suspenseful scene, sometimes that helps build it. And because like when they did those camera shots, like in the operating room and at the funeral, that if that had had music with it, or if I'm just not remembering that it did, it just maybe the music was bad. I don't, if,
there was only about one instance that I remember that there was music added into that type of scene,
yeah,
and it was just so very low key
yeah,
that it wasn't adding anything.
yeah, it was lost. And so, and that's why I say maybe our did not have the budget to have someone do music, and that's where things fell apart.
Yeah, because there should have been, with all that lackluster of dialogue, there should have been some kind of either body language taking up with it
Hmm.
or some kind of audio to cause more suspense in the film.
Yeah, I
But
agree. I
it
totally.
was interesting enough to watch
Hmm.
once I got started.
I enjoyed watching it. Like it did keep my attention once it kind of got into what was going to actually happen.
Hmm.
But getting there was took a little kind of like, okay, pay
Yeah,
attention, focus, stay with it.
yeah, I will admit wholeheartedly it put me to sleep a couple times.
Yeah.
So
You told me.
yeah, I'm just being honest there. It put me asleep a couple times, so I had to like make
Yeah,
sure that I was steady enough to watch it. So after
exactly.
that,
Exactly. And that
but
and that's okay. And
well,
again, here's another, Poe influential movie, and obviously we're not highly recommending it, but
mm-mm.
it is worth a watch. It is worth a watch. And
Yeah,
I do believe someone could take this story, connect it more to the premature burial,
hmm,
and make it a top-notch film.
yeah. Someone in today's society could totally revamp this movie, different actors, add a little, rewrite it to where you kept the premise of the story, but really put meat with the bones of it
Hmm.
and make it phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it definitely has that pizzazz to it.
Yeah,
It
it
just
does.
it just wasn't, it was built like a six-cylinder vehicle, but was only running on a four-cylinder
Yes, absolutely.
with the hamsters getting really tired and falling off the wheel. I'm just saying. All right.
All
So
right. All right. So, Jeannie, what is our next movie that we are watching after?
okay, let me double check. We got to make sure
I
because
can't, I have my list, but I don't know where it is.
hold on, I got the list right here because Dr. Crespi. Well, then it's back to the Black Cat, 1941.
Oh, the 1941, but who's in that?
Basil Rathbone, Hugh Herbert, and Broderick Crawford,
Okay.
and directed by Albert S. Roble.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the
So,
next one is another Black Cat 1941 version.
That's interesting. It will
Hmm.
be it'll be kind of fun watching that, not only to compare it to Poe's The Black Cat, the written story, but
Hmm.
also the Bela Lugosi Boris Karloff Black Cat. Is it just
Yeah.
running through, or is it more to Poe's story?
Yeah, well, this one this one fits more to my current life
Oh,
about being isolated and living with cats. Um, so this one more along the lines of Crazy Cat Lady. Um,
okay. That's all. That sounds great. Yeah,
yeah, it does. It definitely has a different take than the other one we talked about.
yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what it comes out to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of Basil Rathbone, uh,
Hmm.
I have seen some of his Sherlock Holmes films before.
Hmm.
It's been years ago, and I've read many of the Holmes stories, but I've never watched these like in order of how they were filmed. And so I made myself a list, and I just have watched The Hound of the Baskervilles because that was their first one. And
Hmm.
so I eventually, when I get more time, I'm going to watch more of them because I thought it'd be kind of fun going from this one to the next one and so forth.
I
So,
remember that movie and I remember Basil Rathbone in it because I saw that for the first time when I was in seventh grade.
okay.
My teacher, we were reading Sherlock Holmes
Hmm.
and we saw because we were reading The Hounds of Baskerville
Yeah.
and we watched that movie and I was
Nice.
just that I think that's where my first love of black and white movies started coming in
Okay.
the old days and stuff. So,
Yeah. Okay. Very
but it was
yeah.
very interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, next time we're going back to the Black Cat.
Hey, that's good with me.
And maybe this time we might get closer to Poe's story.
I hope so. I hope so. It'll be very interesting going forward with all these different movies,
Mhm.
finding one that is
As
almost
close to it as
as
possible, yeah.
possible. Yeah. I mean, I know there's never going to be one that's exact, but it's going to be
Mhm.
close, you
It
know.
is. It is. So until next time,
We are oh
Poe.
out.